We've been waiting all season for this. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Double Play Podcast. The World Series is upon us. It starts this Friday. It is the Phillies. It is the Astros. Two very different teams on how they got here. Jack, I think we can't keep anyone waiting. It's the World Series. Let's get right into it. How did these teams get here?
So it's pretty much, you're completely right, a different path for each team. The Astros, the 1 seed in the American League. The Phillies, the 6th seed, the last team in the playoffs. Wouldn't be in the playoffs if it was last year. They got in because of the new format, and here they are. They're playing deep into October in the World Series. The Astros won 106 games, won an AL West title, got to their 6th straight ALCS, swept the New York Yankees, who looked like the best team through the entire first half of the year. And then you got the Phillies, who have just been so energetic through the postseason, willing their way to the World Series. I think it's going to be a fantastic series. How did the Phillies get here specifically, though, Ryan?
Yeah, so the Phillies, they win 87 games. Like you said, they barely got into the playoffs. They got the last wild card spot. Wouldn't even have been here if it was the last year's format. They swept the wild card versus the Cardinals, which we both had the Cardinals winning that one. And, you talk about how they're in the World Series. In that series, Game 1, they had a crazy ninth inning comeback, which seems they've had quite a few of those this year. And almost look back, if they didn't have that ninth inning comeback against the Cardinals, they might not even have made it out of the wild card round. So they win that game, they sweep that series. They go on to dominate the division rival, the Braves, in 4 games, and then they dominate the Padres in 5 games. That's how they got here. That's the Phillies. Jack, what happened with the Phillies?
Well, for the Phillies, the kind of comparison I put for them was they play like a chicken with their head cut off in the playoffs so far. Like, they don't care who they're going up against. They don't care what the schedule is, whether they're down in the 9th inning, whether they're going up against the reigning champion Braves. Like, they just unleash all their great hitters. They've had so much energy, and it's almost like it doesn't matter what's going on the other side. Like Bryce Harper, Rhys Hoskins, Nick Castellanos, all these just great players the Phillies do have. They're just going crazy. Philadelphia is going crazy. And it's a team, you look, 87 games, you think they shouldn't be in the playoffs, they shouldn't be in the World Series, but they've done everything right in the postseason. And it's almost like they don't have a care in the world who their opponent is. They're going to go out there and play their game. And
then how did the Astros get to this point?
Well, the Astros, they're one of 3 teams to never lose a game in the playoffs and then make it to the World Series. They are 7-0 right now in the playoffs with 2 sweeps. Granted, they came in some weird ways where they had a great comeback in Game 1 against the Mariners and then a Game 3 18-inning 1-0 win. But they made chopped meat of the Yankees this past week. They swept them. It never really looked all that close. The Yankees maybe had a shot in 1 or 2 games, but the Astros absolutely commanded that series. In the past couple of years, they've lost a manager, general manager, 2 of their best players in Carlos Correa and George Springer. Here they are again, back in the World Series, and this was probably their easiest path on the way there. They dominated for 7 straight games.
Yeah, the Astros have dominated the American League all season, really, and including this postseason. Like you said, they're unbeaten so far. And interesting to note, we'll talk to you whether we think that's going to happen, but the first 2 teams to go undefeated into the World Series have then lost in the World Series. So we'll see if that trend continues for the 3rd time with the Astros. And then, this is their 4th World Series in 6 years. They've only won it once. The narrative here is, can they get back over the hump? They certainly look like the favorites on paper. They had 3 games in Houston against the Phillies to end this season, where the Astros took 2 of 3. It was the last series of the year. But let's get into this series specifically, how they match up, who has the edge. Jack, do you want to start us off with the lineup?
Yeah, before we get to the lineup, those 2 of 3 in Houston at the end of the year are a little misleading, considering that the Phillies were hungover for the latter half of that series, I'm pretty sure, out in Houston after clinching a spot in the playoffs. So might be a tad bit misleading, but you're getting 2 teams that haven't played each other a lot this year, and while one team looks good on paper, the other team's been playing out of their minds in the postseason. But starting with the lineup, when we talk about who has the edge, for the Astros, you've got Yordan Alvarez, Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman. Those are kind of the 3 stalwarts that have been there through most of it. Alvarez is a little bit more new compared to the other 2 guys, but Bregman and Altuve have been the anchors of that lineup for years. You also have Kyle Tucker, who's been great the last couple of years. Jeremy Pena, a rookie who's taken over for Carlos Correa, just won MVP of the ALCS. And you've got some other players like Yuli Gurriel, Martin Maldonado, who, while they're not fantastic, they've been getting it done for the Astros in the postseason so far. I would say that on paper, you might look at the Astros side of the lineup and think that it looks better. And they've also been getting a lot of production from guys that really you wouldn't attribute a ton of postseason success to their name, but have been a big reason why the Astros are here so far. And then for the Phillies, you have Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, who has looked like a second coming of himself this postseason, Nick Castellanos, Rhys Hoskins, who I believe should have won NLCS MVP, Bryson Stott, Gene Segura, and then the best catcher in baseball, probably JT Realmuto. It's a pretty close matchup lineup-wise. Who are you taking? Who do you think's got the better lineup?
I think on paper I'm going to have to go with the Astros, but I think it could be very close in how they perform in the series. I think the Astros will have the better lineup and kind of had the better lineup, better names throughout the course of a season, course of the playoffs. But these are some guys for the Phillies that can get hot at any moment. Harper, you mentioned, he's been playing out of his mind. He won that MVP. Hoskins, I believe he went 4 for 12 in the series, and all 4 of his hits were home runs. So he's got that big play ability, if you will. And Schwarber, I mean, you saw that, I think it was in game 1, his home run that went like 800 feet. So he's got that power. He can clear the bases at any time. And Castellanos, I mean, he hasn't been going so far in this playoffs. He's been doing okay, but it's another name that could get going. And then Bryson Stott, he's destroyed off-speed pitches in the playoffs so far. So if he gets going, you get him some big at-bats, Gene Segura as well, and then obviously you mentioned JT Realmuto. So I'm going to take the Astros with this one, but I think there's a very good chance that this Phillies lineup could outplay the Astros over the course of the series.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Phillies, and it's like a combination of half scrappy guys and then half guys that just tear the cover off the ball and hit tons of home runs, where you've got guys like Gene Segura who just managed to get on base. You set him up, though, for Bryce Harper. It's like a 2-run bomb incoming to left field pretty much every time from what we've seen from Bryce so far this postseason. I'm also probably leaning the Astros when it comes to the lineup. However, the Phillies have been hitting the ball better than the Astros in the postseason so far, and it's been their key players that have been doing that in Schwarber and Harper and Rhys Hoskins. Yordan Alvarez played very well in the division series, but did not as well in the championship series. Altuve's been cold all postseason. So on paper, I think you look at the Astros, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Phillies come out as the better hitting team. They're going to go against the Astros pitching, which we'll get to the staff in a second. But I would say on paper, I lean towards the Astros, but I really would not be surprised if the Phillies have the upper hand hitting, considering the way we've seen them put the bat on the ball in the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, the Astros just 1 through 9, it seems like they're all guys that can come through. Pena won the MVP, but Bregman was right up there. He had a great series, and then Yordan is just a guy who you think is going to go yard every time he steps to the plate, and Kyle Tucker can have that at times as well. He's a great all-around hitter. So, I mean, these are some guys. And Altuve, if he gets going, it's going to be very dangerous. He had a couple hits towards the end of that series and was cold prior there. A lot of strikeouts, but if he gets going as well, as we know he can in the playoffs, had a great playoff career so far. So, I mean, both these lineups are stacked, and definitely there's a chance for this to be a high-scoring series, but the pitching staffs may have something to say about that. You want to get into the pitching staffs, and we'll start off with the Astros and who they have coming to the mound. Yeah,
so for the Astros, this is kind of what's gotten them there, I would say, so far this postseason. You've got Justin Verlander, Framber Valdez, who might finish 1 and 3 in Cy Young respectively, with Dylan Cease sandwiched right in the middle there from the Chicago White Sox. But you got 2 top 3 Cy Young candidates on the same team. Lance McCullers Jr. got hit with a champagne bottle on the arm, which I didn't see as many people talking about as I think should, but he seems like he's going to be fine for the World Series. He probably strides in as the 3 starter. You have Luis Garcia and Christian Javier, 2 young pitchers. Javier's made a name for himself this year, and Garcia made a name for himself last year. So those are 2 guys, key starters, in case you have to go to a 5th starter. Really, we haven't seen many teams go to a number 5. They either go bullpen game or they just move their number 1 starter right up there, which is what the Astros can do, considering Verlander and Framber Valdez. Since the Astros are 7-0 in the postseason, each of them have only thrown twice. So they're going to be off some rest. They're going to, I think, be able to make a bunch of starts in this series. It wouldn't surprise me if those guys, they're definitely going to make 4 starts if the series goes long enough, but you might see each of those guys pitch 3 times in the World Series.
Yeah, those top 3 can match up with any top 3. You mentioned Verlander and Framber being Cy Young candidates, and McCullers I had as my preseason Cy Young before he was ruled out for the first 100-ish games of the season. But when he came back, he was great. Cy Young candidate for the last however much he pitched, and he's been great in the playoffs, even with the hurt elbow for his last start against the Yankees. He had a quality start, I believe. But then you get into the Phillies as well. I mean, Wheeler and Nola, that's a 1-2 punch that can. We've talked about that one before. That can battle with any 1-2 punch in baseball. And then you get Ranger Suarez and then Faulkner and Syndergaard, who can be your fourth or fifth if you want to go there. And then, I mean, those are just guys that are great as well. It'd be interesting to see for me with the Phillies side if they get extended out a little more in their starts, because they have had more starts, but they only go like 80-ish pitches. And I originally thought that they were doing that. Maybe they'd save him for another start come later and then maybe a Game 7 relief appearance if needed. But the Phillies manager was saying that he just wanted to win the game that was in front of him. And I feel like with the Phillies bullpen, the reputation they have, I feel like you have a better chance going with Wheeler and Nola, sticking him out. So interesting to see, you're not really saving him for much other than later in the series come this time. So it'll be interesting to see if Wheeler and Nola get extended a little bit more, and if they can hopefully dominate the way they can and make this a competitive series.
Yeah, and you brought up the bullpen. I think this is where you got the biggest difference out of any position group, I would say, is the Astros, in my opinion, have the best bullpen in the league. The Phillies bullpen has stood up a little bit in the postseason, but it's always been their Achilles heel throughout the early parts of the season, including I went to see a game when they played the Giants, and they led pretty much the whole way. I think Hoskins hit a homer. There was another homer, I think, from Schwarber, and then the bullpen just blew it in the end. So the bullpen has been the Achilles heel for the Phillies. It's been better in the postseason, but it still hasn't been perfect. Whereas the Astros bullpen has, it's been just so good. I don't think you can ask for a bullpen to be better than the Astros one has been so far through the 7 postseason games they've played. So if you're getting Verlander, Framber Valdez, McCullers going 6 or 7, you only need 6 to 9 outs from your bullpen. The Astros bullpen, I don't think there's a better one in the league, and I definitely don't think there's been a better one this postseason. So I think the bullpen gives the Astros the edge pitching-wise. I think it's up in the air for starters. I think I still would lean Astros, but the bullpen, if you're talking entire pitching staff, really pushes it in the Astros' favor.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the same way. I think definitely the Astros get the edge for the entire staff just because of, like you said, the bullpen gives them the edge. But I think the starting rotation is a little bit closer. I mentioned the Wheeler and Nola take with any 1-2 punch in the league. So those two guys alone compare with the Astros rotation. But I think those ones are very close. If I have to choose, I might go with the Astros just as a complete staff, but I do really like what the Phillies pitching staff could do in a series if they're given the chance to let it ride out and hopefully make it a shorter game for the bullpen in this series.
Yeah, the key difference for me when you're talking about the starters and you're going 1-2 punch is just the rest factor, where Verlander and Framber Valdez haven't lengthened out a whole ton. They've been able to limit the amount of times they need to pitch per series. You've got the Phillies who really haven't seen the Astros pitcher, so they're going to be well rested. The Phillies haven't seen Verlander or Valdez much this year. You could say the same thing the other way, but the fact that they are going to come into the World Series rather untested, where Verlander got hit around in his first game, but they haven't been throwing exorbitant amounts of pitches over a couple of weeks with short rest. They're going to have a week plus worth of rest. They've only pitched twice in the postseason. They're going to be playing at home the first 2 games. Those first 2 games, to me, are the most important of this series, but I think the reason I'm going Astros over Phillies when you talk about starting pitching is just the fact that they haven't had to pitch quite as much this postseason. Wheeler, Nola going 80-ish pitches. You wonder whether it's for arm reasons. You don't know what it is, but they've pitched more than the Astros so far, so I just think that you definitely lean rest factor to an already on paper better rotation for the Astros.
And now getting into our final category, which was the dog, I wrote it as kind of the intangible momentum crowd factor. And this one, it goes to the Phillies. And I mean, those players get so hype if you watch any of those games. I think they have the better home field advantage with the fans in Philly. They're going to go crazy. And I mean, those Philly fans, they want to be there. I saw a tweet today. It said, it's cheaper for a fan from Philadelphia, to fly to Houston, get a hotel, get a ticket to a World Series game, and fly back than it is to get standing room only tickets for the Phillies, for a Phillies home World Series game. So that crowd is going to be insanely hyped, whereas the Astros, those fans are going to bring it as well, but they've been here before, so they're not going to have that advantage per se for the Phillies, who are kind of a Cinderella team, and their crowd's going to bring it, kind of like we saw a little bit with the Braves last year. So I think for the dog factor, I'm giving it to the Phillies. They've also had clutch hit after clutch hit so far. Gene Segura's come up with a few. Bryce Harper with the home run in Game 5 against the Padres. So for the intangible category, I'm going with the Phillies.
Yeah, I mean, this is what makes this World Series, is the fact that the Astros can be better on paper in just about every category, be 7-0 coming into the postseason, and yet you're still like, can they beat the Phillies? Because the Phillies have been so intangibly good so far this postseason, where they are getting those clutch hits. They are completely rowdy. They're going crazy. They're energizing each other, making each other better. And it's like, this is what we haven't seen from Philly in a long time, and yet somehow they get to the playoffs. No one really expected it, but here they are in the World Series. It's because of the dog factor, or what you wanted to call it. So this is what makes the series interesting, because the Astros should be favored. They probably are favored, but the Phillies can make it interesting, just like they made it interesting against a division-winning Cardinals, a division-winning Braves team, and a Padres team that knocked off the Dodgers. So this is really where I think the series makes or breaks itself, whether the Phillies can keep up the clutch, intangible aspect that they've had throughout the playoffs so far.
And I think one more category we could add that we didn't really add is experience, which definitely goes to the Astros. That will work in the Astros' favor here. I mean, the dog and the hype in the Phillies is great and all, but they've never played in the World, or the majority of them haven't played in a World Series. I don't know actually if anyone on that roster, off the top of my head, or Syndergaard has played in a World Series, but not too many guys have played on this stage, so that could hurt them negatively. Whereas the Astros, they're here all the time. So if you're going to add a fourth category, it would be experience, and that one I would have to lean Astros, and that could also give them the edge in this series.
Yeah, we've said that a lot of times against Philadelphia so far, though. It's kind of I think I would say like they just spit in the face of whatever you want to bring up that would be a disadvantage for Philadelphia. Like, they don't care that they're less experienced. They've been playing well so far. And then talking about another category you could possibly add is manager. I would say that the Astros have the better manager clearly in Dusty Baker, but Rob Thompson deserves a ton of credit for what he's done with the Phillies so far. And the biggest, I guess, piece of criticism that people always have for Dusty Baker, never won a World Series. So now he's going to have to go out and beat a former interim manager this season in Rob Thompson. So if you wanted to add the manager category, they could be even. You might want to lean Dusty Baker, but then again, throughout his career so far has yet to win a World Series. That's something that I think a lot of people will be keeping tabs on as we start the World Series on Friday.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a great series, and a lot of these teams, or both of these teams, will have a lot of things going their way. But what do these teams have to do to win this series? Let's start with one for the Astros, and then let's go for the Phillies, and let's go back and forth. You want to do that way?
Yeah, let's do it that way.
Each.
Yeah, so
Sounds good.
The first key to victory that I wrote for the Astros is don't press. We talk about the Phillies, their energy, their fans, the dog, whatever you want to call it. It's distracting, and it can overwhelm other teams. The Astros, like we mentioned, have been here before. Their game really emphasizes discipline, control, perfection, acting not professional, but again, like you've been there before, and it's worked for them so far. They're 7-0. That being said, though, the Phillies, like we mentioned, they have the energy. They're like that chicken that runs around with the head cut off. Don't get distracted. Don't press and get nervous just because you see the Phillies have some momentum. I think you got to stay back, realize who you are. You're the Houston Astros. Don't press too far like I think the Braves did, like the Padres did at certain points. And I think make them come to you, and the Astros might have a better chance.
Yeah, mine was a little bit similar. It was don't get complacent here. I think it's easy to say you're 7-0 right now in the playoffs. You're a 106 win team playing the 6th seed, kind of from an overview. But I mean, I don't think the Astros are going to do that, but it can be easy to do that. And one thing's clear: it will not be easy against this Phillies team, who's going to come out there like they have nothing to lose. And when you get into the playoff with a team that's hot, thinking they have nothing to lose, that's a dangerous combination, as we've seen in years past. So I think that's a key. The Astros, they can't get complacent. They got to keep playing their game and keep dominating the way they have so far this postseason and this whole season.
Yeah, for the Phillies, the first key I wrote down for them, you have to win one of the first two with Nola and Wheeler on the mound. You're going to be in Houston. It's very key that they win one of those first two games, because we mentioned those are the two aces. You got to take one from Houston in Houston with Wheeler and Nola on the mound. They've got the shakier back half of the rotation and the bullpen. They're going to be on the road. I think if you fall down to the Astros 0-2, it might be insurmountable, especially if both those games pitched by Wheeler and Nola. You'll have to wait for them to come back around. Who knows if you'll get there with the way the Astros have played so far in the postseason. So you're playing in Houston at Minute Maid Park. They're going to be rested. You need to win one of those games with Wheeler and Nola on the mound.
Yeah, the Astros have been able to do everything so far this postseason. They've won a low-scoring 1-0 game where they'll shut you down. Then if you get to their pitchers, they'll win a 7-6 game, and then the next night they'll win an 8-0 game where they'll just completely blow you out of the water. So for me, the Phillies, their key is they need to win games that they have a chance to win. The Astros aren't going to hand them wins and late comebacks like we kind of seen so far throughout the Phillies postseason run. And if you get to points where the bullpen needs to shut them down and then you need runs, I don't know if that's going to work against the Astros team. So if you have a lead or if you're close in games, you're going to have to find a way to win those games. The bullpen will have to be shut down for you. And really just the starters will have to shorten games and the bullpen will have to come through. The offense will have to come through late with more clutch hits. And I think they just need to win games that they're close and they have a chance to win, because if they give the Astros free wins or close wins, it's going to be tough to overcome any more of those in a 7-game series.
Yeah, going back to my second key for the Astros is kind of a flip side of that Phillies key that I just mentioned. The Astros just win at home. It's going to be very hard for the Phillies to upset you if you win games at home in Minute Maid Park. And also the flip side of that, you already mentioned just how raucous we expect Citizens Bank Park to be in Philadelphia. If you can't win at home and you give the Phillies energy going back to their own home stadium with all the crazy fans that are paying crazy amounts of money to be able to go to a World Series game in Philly, you could get taken advantage of. You could get upset by the Phillies. So I think finish the business at home. Make sure you're winning those home games. You have the home field advantage, so make sure you're utilizing it. I think if the Astros lose some games at Minute Maid Park, you're opening the door to a potential Phillies upset.
Yeah, and as for the Astros, is kind of the flip side of what I said for the Phillies' first key. The Astros need to lengthen the game. They need to get to the Phillies' pen early, because that's been a struggle for them this whole season, kind of seasons past. We know that. And if you get to the starters early, kind of chase them out of the game, and then you have to lengthen the game for the Phillies' pen and make their relievers throw a couple innings on back-to-back nights and get them tired over the course of a series, that's going to give the Astros a huge advantage. And I think if kind of winning at home kind of portion to that, if you beat Nola and Wheeler games 1 and 2 and just get them out early and chase them to the pen, I think that's going to be a big key, and like you said, almost insurmountable for the Phillies. If they're down 2-0 with a tired pen and Wheeler and Nola already started at that point, it could be very tough for them to come back in a 7-game series.
Yeah, I agree. And my second key for the Phillies is, in my opinion, the biggest key to the entire series. If the Phillies want to win, they need to get on base in front of their power hitters. We saw the Astros give up some home runs to the Yankees in the division series, but the key was every single one of them was a solo home run, whether it was Bader or Rizzo. Even earlier in the postseason when Judge and Stanton would hit home runs, a lot of them were solo shots. When you talk about the Yankees, the Phillies have won so far because a lot of the big hits they've had are Hoskins home runs or Schwarber home runs or Harper home runs, and there are people on base. I think you're not going to beat the Astros just by hitting one-run home runs. You're really going to need to land those 2-3-run blows, knock the starters out of the game. Don't just set them back a bit with a solo shot that they can work to improve off of. You need to, make the runs count when they're there. So I think you need to get on base in front of Harper, in front of Hoskins, in front of Schwarber, and you need to hit 2 or 3-run home runs instead of solo shots. For me, that's the biggest key of the series.
On the flip side for the Phillies, I said their pitchers need to come through. All pitchers not named Wheeler and Nola need to pitch above average to great. And then that's in addition to Wheeler and Nola. They all need to come through. Similar to the Astros key, if the bullpen blows leads, and similar to the other key, if they don't win the games that they can win, then they likely won't get that chance again against this Astros team who's so hot and so good coming into this series. I mean, kind of example is Game 5 against the Padres. That game went back and forth late, and I don't think you're going to get many chances to do that with the Astros. If you give up the lead late, it's going to be tough for you to get it back. So your pitchers, it starts with the pitchers. You need them to come through and kind of lock down games when you have a chance, and then starters with Ranger Suarez and whoever they decide to go Game 4, they need to pitch well as well to kind of maybe lengthen it out and give your bullpen some rest. which would be key in shortening the game, and that's what the Phillies need to do to win this series, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And those 3-4 starters, I think maybe you're happy that you don't have home field advantage to start the series because they'll have the Philly crowd behind them for a lot of the time that they're pitching. So that could be a good sign for the Phillies and maybe calm down some of the pitchers not named Wheeler and Nola. Who are some of the key players in this series for you? Maybe one from each side.
I think for the Phillies, it's Nick Castellanos. So that's a guy who, power hitter, if he gets a big home run in the series, he could instant Philly legend, right? I think anyone who comes through in the series, if the Phillies win, will be an instant Philly legend. But for Castellanos, he does not have a home run since August 27th. And he was hurt there for a little bit, but down the stretch, the last few series, the year he didn't have one and doesn't have one in the postseason. If his bat gets going in the series, it'll give the Phillies a big boost.
Yeah, for me, for the Phillies, a name that you mentioned a couple minutes ago, Ranger Suarez. He's the 3 starter. You know that other pitchers outside of Wheeler and Nola have to pitch well. That starts with Ranger Suarez, most likely in Game 3. And then another wrinkle is we saw him close out the game in the final clinching game against the Padres. So if they're using him in a bullpen role after he makes his first start, he could be very important to closing out some games where we just mentioned you can't give up late leads to the Astros. So I think Ranger Suarez, for me, is a big key player for the Phillies.
Yeah, and for the Astros, I went Jose Altuve, a guy who's kind of struggled this postseason. We mentioned that earlier. And if he gets going and everyone else for this Astros team play the way they have been, I think the Astros will dominate and win this series easily if Altuve gets going.
Yeah, I had the same player. I thought about going Yordan Alvarez just because when he's on, you can't beat the Astros. But Jose Altuve, I think it's important for him to get going because he is kind of the heartbeat of that team. He's been there the longest. He's been there through it all. He was one of the cheaters, but now it's important for him to, not only for himself, prove that he can hit without cheating in the playoffs, but also he is kind of the lifeline of this team, and they've done well so far without him. But in that leadoff spot, hitting up in the top of the order, playing with speed, playing at second base with some good defense. I think it's important for him to start hitting the ball and just be a leader in a World Series where, yeah, the Astros have guys that have played well so far in the postseason, but this is the World Series. You need your best players to come through. Jose Altuve's been the Astros' best player for a very, very long time. Probably isn't anymore, but I think it's important that he gets going in the World Series.
All right, now let's wrap this one up. Who's winning the series?
Do I have to go first?
Go ahead.
I'm going Astros in 6. I had the Astros before the postseason, sticking with it. Part of me thinks the Phillies could do it just because of the complete intangible aspect of their October so far, but I just think the Astros win in 6.
I went with the Astros in 7, and I could see this series being a home field advantage series where Astros go up 2-0, Phillies come back, win 3 at home, and then they lose game 6 and 7 on the road. So taking Astros in 7.
I think that a lot of people across America are going to go the Astros. They're not going to like it, but this is a different Astros squad, not the same as those years. You got a lot of new players, a lot of new faces that are playing very well. For me, I'm not rooting for the Astros to win. I mean, I'd like to be right from what I had going into the postseason, and I'd like to see Dusty Baker win a World Series. Like, he's the only one, maybe him and Yordan, because Yordan wasn't there during the sign-stealing scandal. Neither was Kyle Tucker. But seeing Dusty Baker win a World Series, I think, would be a little silver lining to the Astros winning. But I don't think this is what you would expect. A team coming 7-0 into the postseason, you expect everyone to just kind of pick the Astros, not think twice about it. The Phillies are going to make this a series, and I want to get that point across. Even though we've said a lot of great things about the Astros, and we both picked them, the Phillies have a real shot of winning this thing.
Yeah, I've actually seen a lot of people through like Twitter polls and Twitter comment sections picking the Phillies, so it's going to be a great series. We saw Braves kind of upset the Astros last year. Maybe the Phillies can be another NL East team to do it, and no doubt it's going to be a great series.
This is the third time in 4 years that the Astros are facing an NL East team in the playoffs. And the World Series, and both those other NL East teams won. And this is the kind of team, like the last point I have is, this is the kind of team that has beaten the Astros in the World Series.
Yeah, another thing is that the Astros don't have is that one random dude on Twitter who in 2019 picked the next 10 World Series winners, and he's 2 for 2 and has the Phillies so far. So maybe he's continued to be right. And like we said, though, it's going to be a great series.
Yeah, some people I feel like they just randomly throw something out on Twitter and it ends up being completely right. So we'll see. He picked the Phillies to win in 2022. So we'll see whether that happens. He did pick my Giants to win in 2026, I believe, and he didn't pick the Dodgers to win the entire decade. So how nervous will you be if the Phillies do win the World Series that this guy really can just see the future?
I'll just probably give up all hope on the Dodgers. Maybe I'll become some other fan on that list just to get a World Series trophy.
Yeah, well, I hope that guy laid down a parlay at least with the first two, and he might be sweating it out going into the third one with like $1 billion on the line at the end.
Maybe.
Let's get into our question segment. I'll let you go first since I think mine will round out the episode well. What do you have prepared for me today?
So I've got a King of the Hill that we've done in the past. TikTok has liked this one, so we're bringing a new little spin. King of the Hill with players playing in this World Series. I added an extra round because I wanted to do 3 players from each team. So you're going to get the initial round and then 4 players coming after. But let's get into it. The first round, Rhys Hoskins versus Alex Bregman.
That's tough. Rhys Hoskins has been very, very clutch this postseason. But I think when you look at Alex Bregman, he's been the better hitter throughout the regular season. He's also hit well in the postseason. I think he's the better defender at a more valuable position. I'll go Alex Bregman.
Alex Bregman moving on to face Kyle Schwarber.
Oh, that's a difficult one. Give me Kyle Schwarber. Although I think Bregman is probably the better player going forward, based on the season he had this year, the energy that he provides and the spark that he can bring from an interesting kind of player in the leadoff spot, give me Kyle Schwarber.
Next matchup is the battle of the Kyles. Kyle Schwarber versus Kyle Tucker.
Oh, Kyle Tucker has let me down a little bit this postseason. I think he had a great regular season, but it wasn't quite as good as Kyle Schwarber. I think he'll be better going forward, but I'll take Kyle Schwarber.
And now let's go Kyle Schwarber versus teammate Bryce Harper.
It's Bryce Harper. Come on now.
Yeah. And I knew this would get to it. This is the matchup I want to know about. It's Bryce Harper versus Yordan Alvarez.
I've been on the Yordan Alvarez train for a very, very long time. I had him winning MVP for a very long portion of this season before he got injured. I think he's the best pure hitter in baseball, maybe. But that being said, Bryce Harper is a top 5 player in the game. He might be the 3rd best player in baseball if you want to put him right behind Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. Yordan Alvarez right behind there. He's top 10 for sure, probably even higher. I think you got to go Bryce Harper, though. He's proven it in this postseason. Already locked up a Hall of Fame vote from me, at least, if I had one. I'm going Bryce Harper, although Yordan Alvarez, those are 2 of the best players in the game.
There you go. Bryce Harper is your King of the Hill. Best player in this World Series, apparently, and that wraps up your question, wraps up my portion of the King of the Hill.
Yeah, I would have. I'm trying to think if I was to do a ranking of the best players in the series. You start it with Harper. I think you go Harper, Alvarez, Verlander, Wheeler. I don't know where you go after that. Maybe Schwarber, Bregman, down that list. Nola, I might put above Schwarber and Bregman. I think it'd be really close. There are a lot of great players in this World Series. You've got some of the truly high-powered teams that have a lot of star power, that have shelled out a lot of money to some great players, but I think it's going to be a great World Series. Would you have gone with the same King of the Hill?
I think I probably would have. The only one, Alex Bregman, Kyle Schwarber would have been close for me, but yeah, other than that, probably the same picks.
Yeah. All right, my question for you is pretty simple. Who's in next year's World Series?
Oh, wow. I'm going to go with the Braves. The Braves are making a return versus the... So much needs to be sorted out. I don't want to go Braves Astros. I think a team I like to bounce back is the Blue Jays. I'm going Braves versus Blue Jays.
Yeah, I would definitely take the Braves. They were the team that kind of sparked my thought process because I think they're getting back to the World Series. And I would take the Astros again. I mean, we'll see what happens in this postseason. But one thing they've proved, even if they haven't been able to win the World Series since that fateful year, they make it to the World Series. They make it through the ALCS. I just don't. And if the Yankees don't get Judge back, I'm not sure there's a whole ton of competition for the Astros. So I think they would make it back, and I think the Braves would be there, and I think it would be a great rematch. We'll see what happens this postseason, but I would go Braves Astros. Let's give our final picks because I think we kind of forgot to do this. Who wins MVP in the World Series?
So we both have the Astros. So I got to think. I think I'm gonna go with Kyle Tucker comes alive and wins World Series MVP.
Wow. All right. I'm going to take Justin Verlander. I think that he can, if he's making 2 starts, he could potentially even pitch a game where the Astros clinch if he's pitching game 5 or even game 4 if it's a sweep. I think Justin Verlander, if he has 2 great starts, even if it is a short series, like a 5-game series, you might have to lean towards a pitcher. And I think the Astros lineup, they're so good. They're all so good that I think they're all going to contribute. It's not going to be like the Phillies where it's Harper and Hoskins hitting home runs and fueling them all the way. I think everyone would contribute on offense. So you'd look at the pitcher that maybe wins 2 games and you only need to win 4. So I think that could be Justin Verlander. We've seen some great World Series pitching performances. You think back to Steven Strasburg. I think Verlander can put up some numbers like that with a lot of strikeouts and win the World Series MVP.
Yeah, it's been a great season, and it's led us to this World Series. It's the Astros versus the Phillies. It's going to be a fun one starting on Friday, and we thank you guys for sticking with us this whole season. And if you're new, welcome. We'll be going this whole World Series, and then we'll get you some more stuff in the offseason. But right now, we're focused on the World Series. Thank you guys for being here. And Jack, you want to take us home?
Yeah, well, first of all, let us know down in the comment section if you're on YouTube or wherever you're watching. If you want to see us do a live stream at any point in the World Series, we'd probably do it over on TikTok or Instagram is my best guess, but I think that could be pretty fun to do a watch along, maybe even for Game 1 on Friday. I don't know if you've got plans. I'm definitely going to try and sit down, watch the World Series, Astros versus Phillies. So I think it's going to be a very fun series. Like we mentioned, we talked about it all. If you're on YouTube and you're already in the comment section telling us that how much you would love to see a live stream, also just let us know what you thought about the episode. Let us know who you think is going to win this World Series. Give us who's going to win, how many games, and MVP down there in the comment section below. Make sure you're following our socials, which are above here, and our personal socials are right down below our videos. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, like the show, leave a 5-star review if you really, really like it, and make sure you're following along. Hit the notification bell on all platforms. But thank you guys for watching. Enjoy the World Series. This is the first season of Double Play. This is the first World Series we're going to have. I don't think we could be more pumped for the World Series between the Astros and the Phillies. Starting on Friday. I guess the last note is just enjoy it, because again, after this, we're not gonna have baseball for a little bit, which is sad. But enjoy the World Series. I think it's gonna be a good one. That's all we've got for you guys. We've been the Double Play Podcast, and we'll see you next time.